This is Chapter 3, Developmental and Genetic Influences on Child Health Promotion. So we're going to talk about growth and development. We usually talk about the two together, but growth really means things that are measurable. A child's height, their weight. We can measure organs and organ function, where development is much more qualitative, where growth is more quantitative. It's how well they do things, the increasing complexity, ability to think more clearly and have motor control, greater skills. So, as we said, the growth is defined as increasing numbers of cells and weights. We usually look at growth on a percentile or on a growth chart, which is a percentile. This says we take 100 children of the same age and line them up. Where does your child fall? And here is a copy of a growth chart. This one's pink because it's for girls. There's blue that's for boys. They come in different ages. There are some separate ones for special circumstances like Down syndrome. But you would take your child's weight over here in kilos. Actually, this is in pounds, this is in kilos. And their age, this one is in months. Nope, sorry, this one's in years, 2 to 20 years. And then you find where the two match. You take the line they're on, kind of follow it out to the end, and it's got here what the percentile is. Wait, no, that's this. It's hard to see it in this little print. There's the percentile. This is so you can measure either direction for weight, and then this one has weight as well as height, stature, in centimeters or inches. So development, I said, is something that's not as quantifiable. It's more of a qualitative thing. We're going to see increasing complexity, the ability to do things they weren't able to do before. But you can't necessarily measure them in pounds and ounces or inches. Some other terms, maturation. This is, to mature, to become better at doing something. This can be an organ or cognitive functioning, being able to think at a higher level. Differentiation, things become more specialized, separating their functions more. Again, following simple to complex. Development, growth and development are very predictable. We cannot tell when they're going to happen, but we know what's going to come first and what's going to come next. So they're very orderly. They progress in a specific way, but how they progress is totally different. It's not just every day a child learns a new skill. They can go a long time without learning any new skills, and then all of a sudden they learn a number of new skills. Every day there's something new, and then they kind of plateau and don't learn anything. So that's what growth and development are like. Children have these growth spurts, so they grow a whole bunch and then they kind of stay there. And one child to another can be very different. Here's a picture I found of two girls. The little one's a little bit older, but quite a bit smaller. So even though we can predict what will come next, we can't predict when. And for the same child or between children, it can be very different. And I said we know what can come next. It's predictable and it follows certain directions when we're talking about growth. Cephalocaudal, head to tail. In utero, the head and brain develop far more than the rest of the body. After birth, the neck becomes the next thing to develop. As a child their neck gets strong and they can hold their head up. And then their trunk, long before they can hold something with a pincer grasp with their fingers, their trunk is steadier, and then it goes down into their legs. It also goes from midline out to the periphery, so proximo-distal. Again, they start with their trunk, and then their shoulders, where they can reach with their arm using their shoulder before they can grab something with their fingers, and then they can grab it with their hand, again, before it gets to the fingers. As they're doing these things, they're bilateral, so it's not one side before the other. And things are going to go from simple to complex. They've got to be able to sit before they can walk. They've got to walk before they can run. They've got to run before they can jump. So it's predictable. And here's some pictures showing that cephalocaudal medial to distal on a baby. So the pace that a child develops can have a lot of variation. Both with one child, things accelerate and then stop, and accelerate and stop, or between children, it's not the same. Once a child learns a skill, then they kind of shift to trying to develop something else, the next skill. In growth and development, there are sensitive periods. Just like in utero, there are sensitive periods. When that organ's developing in utero, if there's something that damages it, it's far more of an issue than that same issue, an illness or whatever, at a period where that organ's not developing. It's the same thing with a development after birth. A child who gets a lot of ear infections between 6 months and a year, it's going to affect their hearing much more than if they get those ear infections earlier than that, or after they're 3 and already talking. So how does growth happen? Well, in infancy, this is the most rapid growth during the lifetime. They grow a lot. Then it slows down until puberty, when it really speeds up again. And then after puberty, it slows down, and we keep changing, though, until we die. So here's a picture of some different kids, different ages. So what affects growth and development? Well, heredity. Some kids come from tall families, some come from short families. Nutrition makes a huge difference. Every generation for the last 100 years has been a little taller, and they attribute that to better nutrition. They actually say we're probably at the first generation that's not going to be taller, and that's also nutrition related, because we have so many empty calories now. I think may have reached our peak on improvement through nutrition, but we're not doing as well on nutrition. Gender. In general, boys are taller and heavy, and girls are shorter and lighter. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. There's 6'3" girls and 5'3" boys, but if you take the genders as a total and make an average. Diseases, especially chronic diseases, will affect a child being able to reach their genetic potential. And environment. We know there are certain things in the environment that change a child's ability to reach that potential. Certain hazards like lead poisoning will affect their growth, their development, their cognitive abilities. Socioeconomic factors. Kids who are in poverty just don't do as well in growth and development. And then season and climate can change those growth patterns, as well as where you live. If you live up in Denver, where there's very less oxygen in the air, or live at sea level, that can affect growth and developmental changes. So next we're going to look at theories. We actually have 5 theories we're going to look at, but the 3 main ones, Freud, Erikson, and Piaget. So Freud says there are these 3 pieces to everyone: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id says, I want it, and I want it now. The ego says, I gotta make sure it's socially appropriate. I may want it, but I'm going to find a way to get it that's realistic. And then the superego says, but there's an overlying right and wrong way to do this. It's the conscience, or he says the moral arbitrator. So here's just a picture. The id says, I want it now. And the superego says, but it's not right to do that. And the ego's in between and says, we'll find a compromise. Erikson also has some other stages that we'll look at later. Freud. Erikson has stages of psychosocial development. 0 to 1 year is trust versus mistrust. If you're just Googling things on the internet, you're going to find he has changed these ages after first publishing his theory, so be careful that what you're looking at on the internet, because trust versus mistrust is birth to a year, not birth to 18 months. Not anymore. And then the next stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt, and that's from 1 to 3. Initiative versus guilt from 3 to 6. Industry versus inferiority 6 to 12. And identity versus role confusion 12 to 18. He has more stages that have to do with adulthood, but we're not going to do those since we're just looking at pediatrics. Here's a little picture of Erikson's stages. So trust versus mistrust. This is that first year of life. A child needs to be able to trust that their caregiver is going to meet their needs. That when they're hungry, they'll be fed. When they're dirty, they'll be changed. After that, they start trying to do things on their own. They want to see what they can do, and if they don't, they can develop the shame and doubt. Or things like they want to bite, but they get scolded for biting. So they know that what they want is what they're not supposed to do, and that's when the shame and doubt can develop. So this is 1 to 3. This is the age the kids want to dress themselves, want to put their shoes on themselves, but they do it wrong. And then we have initiative versus guilt. This is where the child is actually starting to move away from the parent. They need to know the parent's there, that they can come running back, but they want to set out and explore the world, but they need to know it's safe and that the parent is still going to be there when they come back. Right? This is a 3 to 5-year-old. They're just going in the other room. They're not going, to the other side of the world. When they're not allowed to take some initiative and explore, guilt can develop. Industry versus inferiority, 6 to 12. This is our school-age kids. Industry, they are busy. They're in sports and music and school and all sorts of activities. They are doers and producers, and they are proud of the things they're learning. If they're not doing and producing and proud of what they're learning, that's when inferiority can step in. Our teens, identity versus role confusion. They're figuring out who they are and what their role is in the world. This is where they're finally able to kind of see things from a different perspective. They're able to look at the future and visualize what they want for their future and make plans based on that. Here's a child playing in water. They do love water play. So our preschoolers love imaginative play. Our toddlers, they love active play. Piaget, he divides things into basically 3 stages and then a number of sub-stages. But he says you start out cognitively, everything's intuitive. You don't so much think about it as you just learn it. And usually that's through touching it, feeling it, tasting it. And then you go to concrete operational, where you can start to do some operations with the things, but they have to be concrete. You can add cookies together and know that 2 cookies plus 2 more cookies will give you 4 cookies. But again, it's concrete. And then you finally reach an age where you can do formal operations, which is being able to think about abstract ideas such as fair or personal freedom versus societal needs. So here he has sensory motor. So you touch it, feel it to learn it between birth and 2. Then that pre-operational between 2 and 7, where these kids are using play, imagination, but it's still, they can't think abstractly. Then concrete operations, 7 to 11. Here they're being able to look at things and realize that the tall, thin cup holds as much as the short, fat cup. But again, it's concrete, it's not theoretical. And finally, they